Well, hello, everybody. It has been a while since we have been able to be together on this forum, our Thursday night live. It's good to have you here. Glad you're able to join us, whether you're joining us live or not, or maybe you're watching this on some of the saved platforms of social media through my YouTube channel or possibly on the Saanich YouTube or Facebook channels. It's great to have you with us in 2021. Crazy that we are here, but it's great to have you with us tonight. And I just wanted to remind you that if you maybe missed some of the previous episodes, you can go on there. They are saved. They're there. They're available for you, and you can check in with that. Well, tonight it's a privilege of mine to introduce you to someone who is my counselor. When I came to Saanich back in 2004, I heard of Arbour Counselling, and we have used Arbour Counselling to help some of the people within our church family, our church community. I have personally gone to Joel back in the day, back in around 2006, 2007, and then just three years or so ago, when my life was really hitting a hard stretch. Some of you are aware of the season of depression that I went through. I right away reached out to Joel Durkovic. I'm going to invite him to the stream. There he is. Welcome, Joel.
Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm good. Can you tell me, how do you pronounce your last name?
I pronounce it Durkovic.
Durkovic. Perfect. Yeah.
I don't think that's the original Czech pronunciation, but that's what I think it's supposed to be pronounced Durkovic or something like that. But
all right.
Durkovic is how we do it.
Perfect. Joel, thanks so much for being willing to join this little episode of Thursday Night Live. Why don't you just give us a little bit of a understanding of maybe where your season of life you're in. You live in Victoria. How long has that been? And give us a little background of who Joel Durkovic is.
Well, where to start? Thank you for inviting me first. I've been in Victoria since 2003. I actually am a dual citizen. I'm both American and Canadian. So I actually moved with my Canadian wife to Victoria from the Chicago area back in 2003. We were married in 1996. So we lived in Chicago for about 7 years, had a couple of children. And we moved here when they were 3 and 4. And I had been a part of a private practice in the Chicago area in counseling, where I did my master's degree in the Chicago area at Wheaton College grad school. Oh, wow. But before that, I was actually raised in Guatemala, because my father is a Lutheran minister and was assigned to a church in Guatemala City. So I lived in Guatemala till I was 18. From 3 years old. So I've kind of been all over the world, but I make Victoria my home now, and my children are now 20 and 21.
Oh boy.
So we've been here now for a little bit of time.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to show my ignorance. Can you throw a little Guatemalan down on us here?
Solo es español.
Okay.
Español, sí. Yo hablo un poco de español todavía. I still speak a little bit of Spanish.
Nice. I know hay un baño aquí.
Sí, muy bien.
Yeah, that's about all I got. Oh man.
Is that a question or is that a statement? Is there a bathroom here?
There is, just down the hall.
Yeah.
Joel, as I introduced you, I kind of indicated that you are a counselor.
Yeah.
You run work in a clinic, and we're gonna talk about that just a little bit later. But Thursday Night Live, I've sort of shaped it to be an opportunity for people maybe just to tell their story just a little bit, to help us maybe figure out how to navigate some of the tricky ups and downs and bumps and bruises, and how to kind of pick ourselves up and move forward. And you do that professionally for people. You help people, but you see, you're also a human being. And you have you've got your own journey and your own story. And Yeah, I'd love to just sort of meander through that a little bit with you tonight. Pick your
Yeah.
brain a little bit on some of that story. I guess so. My initial question would be, how did 2020 and 2021 starting off? How has that kind of rocked or not your
Oh,
world a little bit?
well, I mean, it's been a crazy time here with COVID and whatnot, and you know, I have more to say about that, but the your question about me being a human being that also sits and holds people's stories and tries to kind of journey with people. But the really important thing for me to be able to do that sustainably is to also take care of myself. As you know, I'm not immune to the same kind of dynamics of melancholy and depression and anxiety that anyone else is. And um, and so I have to do things to take care of myself, which is, it's kind of interesting to kind of be on this side of where you're asking me, well, how do you do that for yourself? And I'm when I sit and hold people's stories and journey with them through that, and so I'd say. I find it really important to be part of a group of colleagues that I can journey with. And one of the privileges of working at Arbour, I actually founded and established Arbour when we moved here back in 2006 is when Arbour got established, actually.
Okay.
So we're in our 15th year. And I came from a practice in Chicago that was a group private practice. And we would meet in the Chicago practice. We would meet every 2 weeks for a 3-hour block with our colleagues and process.
Okay.
And so that vision or that idea is something that I brought with me to the idea of establishing a group practice in the Victoria area when we moved here. And it's been kind of one of the privileges and things I've been most grateful for as we've added colleagues. We're now a group of 6 people. We've been up to 7, but we're now at 6 therapists, and we meet every 2 weeks for a 2.5-hour staff meeting. But we don't talk about admin. We actually use it as a processing time, and so there's various ways in which we spend that time, but we're colleagues that are working together to try to be as real as we can with one another. And so we start our meetings always with a check-in, and different people will take turns facilitating that check-in. But it's what we try to do is model just kind of being real with one another. And so it's we might check in around a word or a reflection that someone brings. And so we actually kind of engage in kind of like a group therapy session with one another every 2 weeks, where we spend the first hour, everyone having a chance to kind of process around the word or around a passage or a poem or something that someone brings. And we try to be as real as we can. And then for the last hour, we talk about some of the clinical cases that we're seeing. If someone is having a challenge with some sort of theme, they might bring that up, and so we do case consultation as well. And it's actually a really rich space to actually be able to remember that we are also human beings. I mean, I think that sometimes counselors automatically get the projection that they know things about people. We don't automatically know things about people, and we have to actually practice being real with one another in order to be and take care of ourselves in order to be helpful to anyone. So
interesting. Community is important. You said there it's a check-in, and I think in this COVID time, isolation has been a real problem. It's been a real challenge. So you have some community through your coworkers, which is really great. I would suggest maybe not everybody has that, but we still can push into community.
Yeah.
And certainly we as a church want to be able to help with that. And if we can't do that, we're in trouble. But
Yeah,
are
you
there
know,
other?
I mean, your comment is well taken. The fact that we're a business, you know, we've been able to continue to meet through COVID. We've set up some protocols, of course, and
Yes.
you know, when we, you know, even from being able to continue to meet in person with our clients, but our staff meetings, we meet in a large room, socially distanced. But that's a good point, that we're still able to meet as colleagues. You know, one real loss that I have felt, and you mentioned 2020 earlier and COVID, and I mean, part of my own journey of taking care of myself is really just in my own spiritual journey, just kind of entering into a place of giving myself permission to really connect with a worship style that is you know, very personal. And I worship in an Anglican church, and the liturgy of the Anglican church and the sacraments that and the service that I attend every week is a real sustaining piece. And that community basically is gone with COVID, right? I mean, for me, there's a real physicality to actually going to a service, being able to kneel, being able to sing hymns. Choral music is a real big part of my worship experience, and Zoom just kind of doesn't quite do it for me. Our church still does Zoom meetings, but so there's been a real loss of the kind of the ritual of being able to connect with people and with the service. So I've really kind of had to find, you know, like trying to find ways to actually still engage in ritual, to sort of take care of myself, you know. And I'm grateful for the community that I have at Arbour, but I'm empathizing with everyone else's loss of community and the isolation that we've experienced. And what I think happens in that isolation is that I think we're more susceptible to forgetting who we are, because, you know, we can get into kind of our own fear and egoic sort of states and stories about what may be going on in the world and about ourselves. And there's no real check-in with other people to kind of keep us honest. You know, isolation, I think, breeds sort of story and fear. At least it has for me. I really depend on other people. And maybe I didn't even realize how much, to kind of remember who I am and kind of keep me in check around my stories. And so I think that's one potential sort of difficulty that COVID has brought, is that in our isolation, it's easy to forget who we are. So we need to kind of find ways to still keep engaged with important rituals.
You mentioned the sort of discovering who we are. You also mentioned the place of worship. And for those who may not be people of faith who are tuning in, I sort of assume you are saying that you are surrendering yourself in that expression to God. And in that, it sounds like there's some understanding of who you are and who He is towards you, and there's some significance to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That one of the aspects of a liturgical Anglican service is that it's like us, you know, there's certain components to a service, and confession is one piece of that. I mean, and sometimes people think, oh, confession, that sounds so negative, but it really is a way to kind of come each week to remind myself that I'm not God, and that I'm in need of God. And so it's sort of a relinquishing and a releasing to acknowledge that, and a remembering in that space to open myself to God's guidance.
So So you would suggest then someone who is not Joel Durkovic, son of a pastor, counselor, you would suggest that practice of confession is something that would be good for anyone in a season of isolation or not. It would be a great practice. In the everyday. Is that an everyday thing that you work on?
Yeah, well, in the loss of the weekly services in which I can go physically to a church service to do that, I feel like trying to find rituals every day to actually connect to some kind of way where I might look at and be honest with myself.
Okay.
And so what's become kind of important. My wife and I had begun practicing this before COVID started, but every morning we kind of have a little bit of a routine. Now, okay, I have to qualify this. My kids are now 20 and 21, so I'm not getting up and making them breakfast anymore.
Right.
But even when they were younger, okay, even when we were like in the midst of the busyness, we still had a little bit of time of a routine where Kelly and I would get up just a little bit earlier. I make coffee. It's my thing. I bring coffee to bed and we spend a little bit of time in quiet. Now we just have a little bit more time. We've got about an hour in the morning where I'll bring coffee. And, I've found that, even though we've always done this, there's some particular tools that have been really helpful for me during this COVID time around sort of helping build structure. And I say they're tools because I think I've needed some we need the voices of other people, and so finding spaces around which to actually and words of other people to actually reflect on have been really important. And so we'll spend what I've found is that we found a rendition of the Psalms. Basically, it's somebody praying with the Psalms. And so we read a Psalm every day, and then we'll read a poem. We have a book of poems. I actually brought my book with me by Mary Oliver.
Okay,
is that coming new? Mary Oliver's book, Devotions. It's a collection of her poems. We read one psalm, we read one poem, and then we spend some time kind of in quiet sort of mindfulness meditation, like a 10-minute guided breathing meditation. And that sort of those external words of other people are just something that I've just kind of moved toward, and my wife and I have moved towards. I read out loud, so we'll read the poem, we'll read the psalm, and it's just kind of amazing how synergistic or synchronous, synchronicity is a word that my wife likes to use, because oftentimes we'll read the poem and we'll read the psalm, and there's just a sense of where they connect together in theme, and it's pretty neat. So that practice, I want to say, I've sort of had to kind of trust what's going to show up with that. And instead of waiting to kind of feel like, oh, do I feel inspired, or is this something that's good, like I'm sort of moved to be able to just trust that that's a space to actually really garner some things from, and that's been something that's really key for us. So that's one way that, even though I don't have the space of confession, if you will, or the rituals of going to church, what I really like about Nan Merrill's, this is the Psalms book that I've got. Psalms for Praying by Nan Merrill. She uses it's kind of like Eugene Peterson's message of the Psalms. It's sort of like his own translation. She takes the language of David's enemies and uses the metaphor of our own fears. Okay. In all of her languages. So it's language that I really identify with, because fears and anxieties and stories and ego are areas that I can struggle with. What are the stories that I'm creating? And so the Psalms are full of lament. They're full of grieving. And it's a way to kind of offer my confession of my own lament, my own fears, so that in some respects substitutes, or let's say adds to, or it's the daily space around which to do that reflection.
Wow. Yeah, I would, man, that sounds cool. And wise, truthfully. I think post-COVID, I would surely continue on, if that is really helping you. You made a comment.
I mean, we were already doing it before COVID. So
right. You said that.
So and I think it's the third time through the Psalms we're on right now. We just read one a day, and it's sort of random. I mean, and there's some days we miss it, because life, but I'd say pretty consistently we're doing this.
So someone is facing some of that fear and that isolation. You're recommending some daily practices, some daily check-ins. It may not seem earth-shattering. They may not be like, whoa, super powerfully profound, but they're still doing something, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I think if there's one thing that I've learned is that, and maybe I have to own that this is partly correlates with my temperament. I mean, I've learned about myself that, even just a sense of ritual and kind of methodicalness around ritual is part of how I operate. I want to recognize that part of your audience, they may not, your temperament may be a little bit different than mine, but, in one of the things that I've found really works for me is just having, kind of routines. And if I wait to actually be inspired or feel like I want to do this, I won't do it. I kind of have found that just sort of saying this is just part of my daily routine, it doesn't necessarily need to even be that elaborate. It's, it's 10 minutes and sometimes I come away feeling like, wow. And other times it's just like, oh yeah, but what I've found is that in doing that and trusting that process, there's a sense of it's been it really, looking in hindsight, it's one of the things that's helped sort of sustain me through COVID.
Yeah.
Because it's been an odd time.
Yes. Yes.
Another thing I have to say in terms of ritual, I mean, and because I do find that one of the things that I kind of happened upon, and I happened to buy a bike right before COVID started. I bought a new mountain bike.
Okay.
And, when we were all in isolation and everything shut down, I was just like, hey, I'm going to go out as much as I can. And I found myself like feeling depressed and down. And I just like, when I was feeling that, I just like hop in the van, take it down to Heartland and go for a ride, an hour out of my day.
Yeah. And
again, this is one of these things in hindsight that I think that has been a super huge blessing. It's the sense of like, we need to express things with our bodies. And I'm, in moving towards things that are hard and finding ways of giving expression with our bodies, sometimes we might need to weep. I found that exercising and being present to the forest and the rocks and the roots and working that out on my mountain bike has just been kind of like this sort of aha space of really feeling God's presence. And Mary Oliver, the poet that we read, she's really big on a lot of her poems are about being present to nature and the beauty that the connection to nature, and how God's creative expression, God is present in nature, and so this ritual that it kind of became a ritual of going out on my mountain bike, and I do it several times a week. And interestingly, going to the same trails too, it sort of become a rhythm and a familiarity. Was also kind of a place of worship, if you will, and confession, and actually working things out with my body. I don't know how that hits people, because it strikes me that, and we were just talking about this as colleagues the other day about how there is a sense that we want to, even as we're helping journey with people in counseling around the grief and the longing that we experience, is like we want to kind of point them to moving toward it, rather than trying to escape it. And one of my colleagues was saying, somehow we need to find a way to give expression to this grief, to give lament, and she was talking about how just every now and again she just needs to cry,
Right.
and it was interesting as we were talking about that, because I think that that's one way of actually giving expression with your body, through tears. And I just found myself thinking, man, I do cry sometimes, but I think I actually give expression to this stuff through going on bike rides, through exercise. So I just thought that was interesting, and it made it. I think we need to kind of be open to what ways are we actually giving expression through our bodies to give voice to some of the deeper things that we might be feeling.
Yeah, that's interesting, because as you were talking, I was thinking about some friends of mine who I may or may not see on social media. Some people I've talked to who have certainly pressed into sort of more of a regular practice of getting out to nature, and just the not just the beauty, but just there's something cathartic about it when they get out there, and there's the vastness seems to speak to them. Yeah.
We live in a place where that's possible.
Right.
I think not just possible, but we live in one of the most beautiful places around.
Yeah.
I don't want to, boast for Victoria as being the most beautiful place in the world, but it's up there, right? There's so much access to beauty, and I think it's one of the things we can easily take for granted, because you walk out your door and you see the Olympic Mountains. After a while, you stop noticing them. But like there is an element of the discipline of actually like opening our eyes and looking around and trying to be present to what is there.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so
man.
I'm grateful for living in this place and having access to that nature.
Joel, you said something a little bit earlier. As you've seen, I've been going down, I've been writing some notes and things just to remind myself, but also some things I wanted to circle back to. You mentioned that you read these, I think some of the Psalms or maybe the poems out loud. Yeah. And I know that in my own, I'm not a counselor. I do try to do some initial help with people. As you know, I refer people to your clinic for you guys to do your great work with them. But there are times where I can help some people with some things. And one of the things that I have discovered, and I have encouraged people to do, is to voice their lament, I suppose, to use your frame, but to literally cry out. Like if you are struggling with something, go out somewhere. If it's in your house and no one's around, that's cool. Go out, but express it. And it seemed to me that it's doing a number of things. There's an expressive thing to it that seems to benefit you. And this sounds weird to people, but I think there's a declarative thing both to God and also to the enemy, who is, I believe, is trying to discourage us and all. Maybe can you just talk a little bit about that? Am I on the right track?
I think you're totally. I think you're onto something, and in some ways, I think that's partly what I mean by finding ways to express things with our bodies. I think we need to open up to, to the various ways around which we can cry out. I think that can be a literal, giving voice and crying out. It's interesting. One of my best buddies has been doing a lot of work on the theme of lament. He's down in the States, and he's actually has done some experimenting with his congregation, the church that he's a part of, to have sort of collective or community expressions of lament.
Okay.
And he says, man, it's taken me, he actually just wrote an article for the Christian Century that he just sent me yesterday, and I was reading it, and he was talking about how important it is in the movement of anti-racism to actually give expression to lament. Because he had a story of where, you know, on the campus in which he teaches, there had been a racial an anti-racist expression that was really hurtful, and he happened to be present when this happened, and they were trying to kind of figure out how they were going to respond to this, and one of the things that they ended up doing is creating a sort of an expression of lament. They had like a gathering where people voiced the wrongness of it, you know, and it was a collective expression of lament, and so. In that exploration, he's done various things of where, like, he's gathered with people and they've actually done group expressions that's taken him a little bit out of his comfort zone. So, like crying out, for example, or using their, you know, acting it out or using their bodies. And I thought it's kind of interesting because it is a little bit out of my comfort zone too, to kind of be like, I'm not the kind of person that's going to go outside and scream into the air per se,
right? But,
you know, trying to find some ways to kind of give voice to the wrongness of things. God can handle it. You know, it's not like it. I mean, I think we're so trained to, you know, to be nice, that we, you know, at some level we kind of mainly only explore the positive expressions or the more, you know, what we perceive to be the more positive expressions of what we're feeling. But we need to actually express the whole gamut. I mean, we're intended, and I think this is one of the things that we probably a theme that we reflect on in our counseling is trying to kind of give permission and access to people to kind of say some of the negative things or quote negative things you might be feeling. We can tend to kind of put a label of negative as though it's sort of a moral quality. Your negative feelings are morally negative, and that's, you know, but I want to say feelings don't have a moral quality to them. They just are, and they're informative. And so we need to kind of find ways to give voice to anger, to sadness, to injustice, and find ways to voice that. And I think that to actually cry out to God, to even be, you know, to even like David does in his Psalms, to be angry with God. Where are you, God? How long? You know, and the sense that God can handle that is an important thing. And so I think you are onto something when in your encouragement to find ways to give voice to that. I just want to expand it in the sense of saying, you know, as someone who isn't a super emotive person, I'm not you know, when my colleague was talking about crying out, I you know, I find myself going, am I supposed to kind of like generate tears somehow? I mean, we can't be disingenuous about our feelings. And you know, even just to be able, you know, like another thing that I like to do is play soccer, and I'm a soccer player. I think about soccer for me as kind of like dance. It's like I don't dance very well. I've got 2 left feet, and I'm pretty clumsy. That's a way that a lot of people give expression with their bodies, and yet to me, like, creating plays on the field and making a pass and running hard is a way. I connect that as a way of giving expression, you know. And so I mean, maybe I'm getting a little bit overly metaphorical, but but I think that we need to give ourselves permission to say, hey, just because I'm not a super emotive person doesn't mean that I don't have feelings. They're there, and we need to find ways to work them out through our bodies.
Yeah, you know, as you've been talking, one of the things that hit me that didn't, is this just that there is the concept of spiritual pathways. And there's numerous of them, whether there's 9, 11, 13, 7, who knows. But there are significant pathways. And what it means is that, you know, you and I might express and have expression towards our God in a different slight way, but that doesn't make mine any better or any worse than yours.
Yeah. We're too eager to compare ourselves to others. We are too prone to that.
So one of the things you've mentioned a few times is we kind of need to get to know ourselves.
Yes.
Which, as image bearers of God, we are created so unique and so beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to know ourselves a little bit? Is there yeah.
That's a great question. A tool that's been really helpful for me. There are lots of good tools out there, lots of personality tools. One that's really popular and I really kind of connect with right now is the Enneagram.
Okay. Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people have heard of it. I recently read a book called The Sacred Enneagram, which is a good one. I like the way the Enneagram as a tool helps sort of speak to the idea that even, of the 9 types, every one of them has a kind of a way in which, like, hey, in my best self, like in my best space, how my type might present. But every one of them has an underbelly, what they call the addiction side. And so each personality type has a way in which, like, it needs to grow and it kind of needs to be aware of, and also the way in which we can actually honor it. It's like, hey, this is how it will show up in the most positive sort of way. So that's a tool that I like. There's a website called the Enneagram Institute that has some interesting resources around that. I mean, you speaking to the uniqueness, I really connected with a book by the former Archbishop of Canterbury. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury back in the 2005 timeframe. Rowan Williams wrote a book called Where God Happens, Discovering Christ in One Another. Okay. And he has this great quote in there that I've really connected to, and he says we are all a unique echo of the life of God. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote because he goes on to talk about it, and he says, Lindsay, if you don't give voice to you, there's some aspect of the life of God that won't be expressed in this world. And what that does is it makes me think, wow, how eager I am to get others to understand, like to kind of try to conform others to kind of how I see the world. And this sort of shifts my stance to having a little bit more curiosity, to be like, when there's someone that's bumping up against me, I want to maybe ask the question more of like, how are you giving expression to the life of God in this world? That also gives me permission to say, oh, my goal isn't to try to be like others. We are all unique. And if I don't give expression to my unique self, there's some aspect of the life of God that won't be expressed in this world. I love that. Wow. And Rowan Williams kind of touches on that. And so it does give the sense of like, hey, give yourself permission to be unique. Yeah. And that's hard for me because I'm pretty traditional. I have the, I'm a pretty generic, bald, middle-aged man. I dress pretty conservatively, but I really, I really find that we need to kind of engage other human beings, not as though we're observers from the outside that are, like watching how other people are different, but as people who are common. That we share this life with, and that are representing and giving expression to some aspect of the life of God. That's how I want to see people. I think that's really important.
Well, Joel, this has been great. I feel like we have stirred the waters a little bit, have shared some things that we could certainly spend much more time on. Why don't you just give us a little bit of an idea about your clinic? Because I just want to put on here the website. There might, some of you who are taking this in, you might realize, I need a little bit of extra help. And Joel has set up a clinic, counseling center. I'm just going to let him talk a little bit about it. I'm going to put the Yeah, the website on the bottom here.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Arbour Counselling Centre we are privileged to lease space from the Church of the Nazarene on Quadra Street. We have for the last 12, actually no, this is our 15th year, and we've leased space from them. They've built a really great space for us to have several offices, and so we have a great team of 6 therapists, 3 men and 3 women, and with a kind of collective experience of, some of us have been doing this. One of our therapists has been practicing for more than 30 years. I'm on year 25, and so there's a lot of kind of collective experience with our group. I'd say that one of the unique things about our practice is this, what I spoke about earlier, is that the sharing with one another, processing cases with one another builds a kind of a cohesiveness. And so there are often times where we're helping give insight around certain cases. And sometimes we are actually maybe working with different parts of family systems, each one of us. Sylvia, our receptionist, Sylvia Seibel, is a warm and engaging person, and our clinic would be dead without her. She is someone who's the first point of contact if somebody connects to Arbour, and her job is to help people feel welcome. And right now during COVID, since our waiting room is closed, basically we're having contact is through our website, where people can fill out a form, and then Sylvia will reach out to you, and essentially kind of hear what kind of themes might be going on and try to connect you with a therapist that fits best. Okay. Right. Because there are those of us that have, a little bit more specialty in working with couples. Others with, may want to see someone that's, a woman or a man, specifically. And so our website also has bios on each of the therapists to kind of give a little bit of information of their background. But that's our scoop, and we love doing what we do, and we got a great group of people here. I'm privileged to work with all of them.
Yeah. Well, Joel, I consider you my counselor, and I appreciate how you helped me through a dark, difficult season. Appreciate your words today, the reminder that we have a God who is very much aware of who we are, that I'm unique, and if I don't express who I am, a part of the echo of God is not there. That is powerful. To learn how to lean into some of those daily practices. And I think you said, even when you don't feel like it. Challenging. Daily practice. Get out there into nature maybe, or find your expression. Right. It could be a creative expression. It could be a physical expression. Yeah. Right. Well, everybody, thanks
so much for inviting me.
Oh, this was great.
It's been great to talk to you.
It goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. 45 minutes went by really fast.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody. If you are needing some help, don't be afraid to reach out. Arbour Counselling, Saanich Baptist, we would just love to help you. God bless you. Have a great
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yep,
you take care. Bye-bye.